Hi, thanks for being with us this morning. You're watching Fruit of the Vine, cultivating collaborative relationships that blossom into cross-campus information literacy initiatives. I'm Mark Lenker.
And I'm Liz Kocevar-Weidinger, and I'll get us started today. First, we'd like to begin with the marketplace. In 2000, in the state of Virginia, the Governor's Blue Ribbon Commission recommended that the State Council on Higher Education for Virginia, SCHEV, coordinate the efforts to measure academic quality, and in this request, SCHEV asked all of its state institutions to measure the competencies in certain areas for Virginia students. Information literacy was one of those areas, and at Longwood, the library was asked to head up this process on our campus. In response to that, the library set up a campus-wide information literacy task force. We believed that it was imperative to have cross-campus participation and buy-in in this process. Therefore, our task force consisted of deans, faculty members from across campus, and of course, librarians. We already had a few documents that supported our efforts. Longwood's commitment to information literacy is reflected in Longwood's general education criteria to provide opportunities for students to increase information literacy through contemporary techniques of gathering, manipulating, and analyzing information and data, and develop the ability to acquire, organize, present, and document information and ideas. So we already had the written support at Longwood to implement this. Going forward with the task force defined information literacy for Longwood, which was closely aligned with the Association of College and Research Libraries, criteria and guidelines for information literacy, and we also agreed on the method of assessment for this competency. Thus began our collaboration cycle. Information literacy at Longwood University, as I said before, was rooted in our general education criteria and also in the librarian commitment to information literacy expertise and the statewide initiative. The cycle continued, and I'll outline this before I explain each one, was, like I said, the campus-wide information literacy task force, working with our Office of Assessment and Institutional Research to coordinate the activities, working with our colleagues across campus to develop our assessment, working with other faculty members to gather information, and then finally, our process for assessing and communicating our findings. The library was fortunate that the Office of Assessment and Institutional Research at Longwood was willing to work with us so closely to coordinate this activity. We had other partners as well. The coordinators for writing competency and critical thinking competency also wanted to use the same instrument as the library, student papers from upper-level intensive writing classes. The Office of Assessment and Institutional Research was willing to go out on campus and gather those papers for us and coordinate all of our activities. They were also willing to pay our graders, faculty members from across campus, to actually grade our papers for us. They also assist in data collection and analysis. After we worked with the Office of Assessment and Institutional Research and our writing and critical thinking coordinators to develop our instruments, to get our process in line, next we had the time period for grading. In this process, we have a one-day grading session in which approximately 6 faculty members from across campus get together. We have a norming session to make sure that everyone is grading in a similar fashion, and then we spend a day grading these papers. The benefits to working with faculty members from across campus is that cross-grading from scorers from different academic backgrounds strengthens the validity of our assessment. The faculty members appreciate the student experience and articulation of information literacy across the different disciplines, and they spread the word informally about student performance. One of the more interesting comments that occurs during these sessions is that faculty's faculty members comment on how they now empathize with students that are writing different papers from across campus and the different styles that the different disciplines ask for. Having faculty members also bolsters the credibility of our recommendations after the grading sessions because they've participated in the process and they understand the process better. Now Mark will take us through some sampling activities that demonstrate what our assessment is about.
Thanks, Liz. So I'll just go through some of the criteria we used to look at the students' work and give it an evaluation for information literacy. And to do that, I'll just look at this sample paper, and you should know that it's something I just made up. It's not the work of a Longwood student. So let's go ahead and go through the different criteria that we apply. Our assessment looks both at how students use sourced information in the body of the paper, as well as looking at the bibliography at the end of the paper. So there are two scores that we're combining. When we're looking at the students' work in the body of the paper, how well they use the sources there, we've got 5 criteria that we apply. One is relevance. The highlighted passage, you can see, it supports the main idea of that paragraph and the objective that the student has set for the paper as a whole, and that's what we're looking for in relevance. But it does so in a way that's a little bit abrupt, so it didn't quite get full points, but those are the things we think about when we're looking how the student used the sourced information. The next criteria is readability. The paper that will get full points is going to present the source material in a way that would be suitable for publishable academic communication. And in this case, everything is very clear, so it got full credit. Another criterion that took us a little bit of time to develop, but it's a pretty, I'm glad we have it as part of our assessment. How clearly can you tell whether the sourced passage is the work of a student or the work of an outside source? In this case, you've got a couple of indicators. One, the student refers to the ancient comedic poets, so that shows that it is not the student's work. Also, you've got the superscript at the end, indicating that there's an end note that's going to give a more complete description of where the information came from. So, full credit for that. Finally, we take a look at whether the student has followed the appropriate convention for citing sources in their discipline. In this case, it's a history paper. It looks like they're using the superscript and endnote system that would be appropriate for citing sources in that field. So it got a full credit for that. And finally, we look to make sure that source information corresponds, references to sourced information corresponds with an entry in the student's bibliography or works cited paper at the end of works cited section at the end of the paper. And in this case, you can't see the slide, but you'll have to take my word for it. It does correspond. That seems like a small thing, but it's really rather important. When things don't line up, it does make the paper much more difficult to read. And some styles require that you use a slightly different format when you're indicating a source that's been used more than once. So it does take a little bit of skill that students need to learn to be able to do that correctly. Okay, so those were the 5 criteria that we'd apply for looking at how well the student uses the information in the body of the paper. Now we're going to go through the 4 criteria that we use when we're looking at what we find in the student's bibliography. The first criterion that we look at is types of sources. We have different discipline-specific guidelines for what would be an appropriate mix of academic sources and popular sources. In this case, in history, we would expect that for scholarly work, you'd use a majority of journal articles, books, primary sources. In this case, looking through these citations we have, we see that there's one book there at the bottom by Peter Robert Frank and Marathaki. But also, in the entries above, they're all entries from places like NetPlaces and Wikipedia. These types of sources can be okay when you're gathering background information, but we try to encourage the students to use these types of sources as a springboard for finding more authoritative sources. So we did dock the students quite a number of points for not going after those more authoritative sources in their bibliography. The next criterion we use is number of sources. For this, we apply a sliding scale that's based on the idea that, as a general rule, a paper should have one outside source for each page of the paper's length. This differs from the requirements of individual assignments in some cases, but as a general rule that we can apply across the board, this is what we've gone with. And in working with our faculty partners, they seem to think this was a good guideline as well. In our sample here, this is a 4-page paper, so using 4 sources would give them full credit, 8 points. Another very important criterion that we use is to look at the currency of the sources. To do that, we have different thresholds that we establish for different disciplines based on our idea of the rate at which information becomes obsolete in that discipline. For the humanities, we have a pretty generous window. We set the market at 25 years. You may ask, in the humanities, is that really all that important? We found that a lot of times in looking at assessment results like this, it appeared that students didn't necessarily have an understanding of the importance to take a look at the current scholarship, even on topics that may have happened a long time ago. So we did want to put some sort of threshold there to make sure that students are looking at some of the more current sources. Looking at what we have here, it appears that all would be within the 25-year window, so it would get full credit. Even though we've got 3 web sources that just have an access date, not a copyright date or a publication date. But in this case, I think we're safe to give full credit. If it had been a paper in business, say, where we set the threshold at 7 years because information does become obsolete more quickly in that field, yeah, it would have been tougher to make this call. Another criterion we use is to look and make sure that they follow the conventions for citing sources for the style that they're using. In this case, we're working with a Turabian or Chicago style that you'd expect in a paper in history. And it looks like all the necessary ingredients are there and in the correct order. So the student got full credit for that aspect of the assessment. Here, we've got our aggregated results for the past 2 years that we've conducted this assessment in this form. I feel good about it as kind of a baseline of data that we can use for assessments that we'll conduct in the future. Having this aggregate information works as kind of a nice sort of general barometer to look and make sure everything is the trends are proceeding in a favorable direction. We also have data broken down by college and department, which can help us when we want to go to the faculty in those departments and have a conversation about what might be done to improve the students' information literacy outcomes. So this slide kind of shows you how all those different criteria come together into two scores, one for the use of information that you see in the top box, then the score for what we found in the bibliography in the second box. Finally, you've got a combined score, which has been pretty consistent in the 2 years, 73 and 74%. So when people actually look into our product to kind of go with our theme of fruit of the vine, when people are looking at our product, we're expecting it to be useful to administrators who could report to groups like SHEV and SACS, how Longwood is doing in pursuing information literacy. It could also be important for them in terms of making decisions that will influence local outcomes. Also, it could be very important for instructors to be familiar with this information, as it can help them to make sure that their students have those information literacy skills that they need, and they may want to work with the library to develop that. Finally, it's very important for us as instruction librarians in particular. Like I said earlier, we can use this information to follow trends from year to year and see how our students are doing, and how, although information literacy is a campus-wide initiative, we like to see how our efforts are making a difference. And it can also give us a clue to areas that might be a little bit weak, that might require a more specific assessment to investigate that further, so that we can know best how to use our energies and the time that we have with our students. So that gives you an idea of how we use this data to close the loop to improve information literacy outcomes for our students. Back to you, Liz.
Thanks, Mark. In summary, the State Council of Higher Education in Virginia asked its state institutions to measure information literacy competency of its students. Longwood already had embedded in its general education criteria and its mission statement its commitment to information literacy. The library headed a campus-wide effort to define information literacy for this campus and to determine how this could be best measured. We worked with the Office of Assessment and Institutional Research to coordinate these activities. We also worked with other coordinators, writing and critical competency coordinators, because they used the same instrument, student papers from upper-level writing-intensive courses. We gathered our instrument, these papers. We had faculty members from across campus grade these papers according to the criteria that Mark has reviewed for us. We gathered the data, we analyzed the data, and we share it with the stakeholders throughout campus. In the sharing of this information, the campus has been very receptive to our recommendations and to hear our case. So we feel very fortunate that the campus is receptive to us, and we feel confident about the methodology that we use. In conclusion, we believe that information literacy skills are critical if we want to fulfill Longwood University's mission statement of graduating lifelong learners who stay connected to what is new in the world. We believe that the assessment that we've developed in collaboration with many others across campus is effective in measuring the competencies for information literacy of our students. Thank you.